Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Autumn and today I am going to be talking about my quarter 1 reading stats and all of the books that I read. This is the first time I'm doing a quarterly wrap-up video like this, and hopefully it's going to work out. So I'm going to share a little bit of the stats that I use from StoryGraph. I'm going to go through each month individually, January, February, and March, and I'll talk about the books along the way. In the first quarter of 2025, I read 16 books, which is a lot for me. So for January, I read 4 books with a total of 2,059 pages, and the average time it took me to finish these books was 5 days. So the first book that I ended up reading in 2025 was Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. So I won't read the full synopsis, but the little tagline at the top says, "We can't choose what we inherit, but can we choose who we become?" This book I gave 3.5 stars. I love multi-generational books, and this book definitely has that in here. I loved the different POVs that we followed. I feel like Charmaine Wilkerson did a really solid job with the character development and really making you feel for all of these characters across time. I believe this was her debut. Yes, Black Cake was her first novel, so I cannot wait to read more from this author because her storytelling is so beautiful and so unique. And if it's like this with her debut, I have no doubt that with Good Dirt by the same author that came out just recently, I have no doubt that that book is absolutely brilliant. So I can't wait to continue reading with this author, and I am really happy that this was the first book that I read this year. I had a few issues with this book, with some of like the pacing issues and some things that I felt like didn't really fit into the story that was being told, so it kind of took me out of the story a few times. But at its core, I think it's a very beautiful story. This author has so much potential, so I'll definitely be picking up more from this author. I did end up listening to the audiobook, which I enjoyed the audiobook, and I sat down and read the physical copy, and I pretty much tandem read this entire book. Highly recommend. The next book up, and I won't harp on this one too long, but it is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This was a reread for me. It's a 5-star read. It is the villain origin story to President Snow in the Hunger Games trilogy, also by the same author that came out 20-ish years ago, I feel like. This was a reread for me. I read this in 2020 when it came out, and I read this in preparation for Sunrise on the Reaping, which came out just about a month ago. That was the purpose of me rereading this. With it being a 5-star read, I don't feel like I need to say too much more. I was very much somebody who loved and was really fascinated with Snow in the, not loved, did not love this man, but I was really fascinated by Snow, and I was really fascinated by his story. And while it's a totally different story, I feel like, than the Hunger Games and maybe what some people were expecting, it was exactly what I wanted. I love Suzanne Collins' storytelling. She writes with intention, and that was her intent with this. I also own the audiobook. I bought it years and years ago when it first came out through Audible, so I still have audiobook through Audible, and I did tandem read this book. The next book up was Ruin by John Gwynne. This is the 3rd book in a 4-book series. This was 5 out of 5 stars for me. This whole series is like a story of good versus evil. It follows, all 3 of the books so far follow a huge cast of characters who are on the different sides of this god war. When the story starts, I'll be totally honest, at least for me, I didn't really know who was on the good side and who was on the bad side. But as the story continues, you do realize who is fighting for the angels and who's fighting for the demons. And I love this concept. I absolutely love where the story's going. The ending of this, I am just saying that John Gwynne gives you the gut punch every single time. I swear, the last like 50 pages of all 3 of the books that I've read so far, they make you think that it's going in one direction, and you're like, okay, yeah, well, this is how it's gonna end, yada 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 yada, and then out of nowhere comes the Kool-Aid man breaking through your wall. John Gwynne's storytelling and his writing style is just so beautiful and so unique, and I really do love how he crafts this world, a lot like Brandon Sanderson, which I did read a Brandon Sanderson book, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But something I love that John Gwynne does that Brandon Sanderson also does is they will give you like an idea or like a word and introducing like a new concept or a new theory or something, and you're like, I don't know what this is, but he just like plants that seed, and when it's deemed important, he will come back to visit that topic. And I do know that John Gwynne does this very well, and it keeps me very entertained and it keeps me in the loop with the story. He's definitely not shy of reiterating certain information. Sometimes I feel like it might be like a smidge too much, but it's extremely helpful when you have spent almost a year reading the whole series, and some things from book 1 resurface. John Gwen is an angel and provides you with a sentence or two of a background of what happened in the ye olde times, you know, like in book 1 ye olde times. Obsessed with this entire series and I really can't wait to continue. I also ended up tandem reading, like the other 2 books that I've read so far this month. I did tandem read Ruin. I have to tandem read huge books like this. It's pretty much the only way I can get through huge chunker books like this in a timely manner. The next book on this list, which I do own the physical copy, but my mom is actually reading it right now. It is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book was also a 5-star read. So this book follows the life of Evelyn Hugo as she retells an account of her entire life to a journalist that she handpicked for a specific purpose. That, of course, as the story unfolds, we find out why Evelyn Hugo ended up choosing this specific journalist to share her story. First off, I love how Taylor Jenkins Reid crafts her characters. I think that Evelyn Hugo is very relatable. She's beautifully tragic. She is a character that, even though I am not rich and I'm not famous or anything, I felt like I could connect to her and to her struggles and the consequences of her actions. I think that this story really does show where Evelyn does think of other people and she's doing her best to make the best choices, but sometimes they come across as extremely selfish and she comes across as not a really good person for the choices that she makes. But there's so much more to her than just that single choice, even though like that single choice can have like tons of consequences. I think that this author did a really great job of having these conversations and also having the conversations about how media can skew how the public views certain people. And that was something that I really enjoyed seeing. I do love stories that have different kinds of formatting. In this book, from what I remember, I don't have the physical copy to check, but you would get newsprints or like newspapers. I love when books mix it up and mix up how you get your information when it's done in a very like strategic way and it makes sense to the story. All of that to say is I loved this book for all of the mixed media and how true it is that there can be one scandal that happens. We're only getting the information that the media gets. In this story, we're also getting Evelyn Hugo's side of the story. We already know what the public knows, but then we're also getting Evelyn Hugo's story and how raw and beautiful and just sometimes really tragic and sad of how these situations, like how this led to this. And this book I did end up tandem reading. I absolutely loved the audiobook for this. Highly recommend Ruin by John Gwen and The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I read both of these books for a reading vlog. I'll leave it linked down below if you're curious about more thoughts on these 2 books. But we are going to go ahead and move on to the month of February. I don't know if you guys could hear my little candle over here, but it's one of those that does a little pop thing. I love those wooden candles that do the little pop. It's so soothing. I'm sorry if you can hear it and if it's annoying, but it is so comforting right now. So in February, I read 6 books, a total of 2,194 pages, and an average time to finish the books was 10 days, which that's pretty interesting that I read more books, more pages, but it took me more time to finish these books. I might know a little bit of the reasons why. A lot of the books I was reading simultaneously. The first book that I read in the month of February was The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. Listen, I am a hoe for Geneva Rose. It's plain and simple. I read 2 books by this author. I own 2 out of the 3 books that I've read. I will continue to read this author until I feel like I can no longer support the writing. It follows a married couple. Sarah Morgan is a successful and powerful defense attorney, and her husband, Adam, is a struggling writer who has had little success in his career. And out in the secluded woods at this couple's lake house, Adam is having an affair with a woman named Kelly Summers. And then one morning, everything changes when Kelly is found brutally stabbed to death in that summer home. Sarah must take on her hardest case yet, which is representing her husband to prove his innocence. I gave this book 5 stars. I had a lot of fun with it. I tandem read this just as I've tandem read every book so far. I loved the audiobook. So there were a few differences with the physical copy and the audiobook. So there were a few things that were inconsistent between the 2 books, but it was just more of changing wording or taking out full lines. And some of the words and some of the sentences that were taken out totally make sense because they were a little creepy and a little weird. I also think with Geneva Rose, I go into her books with the expectation of to have fun and to be in the middle of all of the chaos. I don't want to say I go in with super high expectations or like super low expectations, but I feel like with Geneva Rose, you just have to go in for the thrilling but kind of a a wild time, because there's some situations in here that I feel like you need that suspension of disbelief in order to enjoy it. I go into just like have a fun time, a wild time. I love chaos. There were some parts in here where people were yelling at each other, pointing fingers, accusing, and it felt like I was watching a reality TV show, and I loved that. Even though I hate reality TV, I loved that part of this. I also really loved the ending. I think that the ending and how it ended was super fun. I also read this book for a reading vlog, so I'll leave that linked down below. But I know in the last maybe 5 or 10% of this, my jaw was on the ground and I was like freaking out. It was just chaos that was happening at the end. The next book up, which I do own, but my mom is also reading this book. I actually think she's read it. I just haven't gotten the book back from her, but it is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I love Emily Henry. We're just gonna jump out the gate and say I love her storytelling. I love her writing. I love everything about all of her books. So this book I read in the same vlog as I read The Perfect Marriage. This book follows our main character, Daphne, who's a librarian, but she's about to get married to her fiance. And it's like her fiance's bachelor bash weekend. His old childhood friend Petra was there. They pretty much like confessed their love to each other, and I think Daphne's fiance's name was Peter. They ended up calling off the wedding and they broke up. Daphne had to move out of the house that they had. Petra moved into the house and Daphne had nowhere to go. So where did she end up going? She moved in with Petra's ex-boyfriend, Miles, because he had an open space in his apartment. This book is just a hoot of a story. It was so much fun. It was really funny, cute. I do think that there are a lot of like heavy topics in this book, and also with my experiences with reading Emily Henry, I feel like she tackles some hard-hitting topics really well. She makes her characters feel super real, like I could connect with all of these people. But I think that Emily Henry just really holds the baggage with all of these characters really well, and she really makes her characters lean into those problems and lean into their insecurities, and to me that's what I live for. I mean, yes, it's a romance and yes, it's spicy, but that's just not what all of her books are about. I just feel like that her characters you can really connect with, even though I think that her stories have solid plot. I think that her characters carry her stories, and I think that her writing is so fun. I did tandem read this book as well. I enjoyed the audiobook. I am not one to read books in a day. While this wasn't a super long book, I read it in a single sitting. As I spring cleaned my house, I read this entire book. This would definitely be one I would reread if I ever wanted to revisit these characters and just like have those fun and exciting and laid back cozy feels that I always feel like Emily Henry's books give me. So this next book up on this list is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in, I don't know actually what the series is called. It eludes me at the moment. This was my first Brandon Sanderson book. I read this for my book club that I run with my buddy Brie Bonomo. It's a totally free little book club where we pick a series and we read it over the course of a few months. This was the first book that we did this year when we revamped our book club. I loved it. I gave this book 5 stars. I annotated, I dog-eared, I wrote all over this book. I'm going to have this copy of this book for years and years and years. I definitely see myself returning to this book. So this book follows our main character, Ven, and she is a street urchin. She's very poor, and she ends up becoming part of a crew that is going to take down the final empire. I loved this book. I loved the world building. I loved the magic system. I think Brandon Sanderson did such a fantastic job of creating a world and a magic system that feels like it logically makes sense. I have watched some of his writing lectures online, not the new ones, but his 2020 ones, I think it was. I have watched all of those numerous times, read some of his blogs on his website. He loves creating worlds and he loves creating magic systems, but he wants to get down to the nitty-gritty of it. And that's exactly what he does in this. If you think logically about all of the intricate things of this magic system and just how vast and interesting it is, he blows it out of the water. In addition to all of that, he also creates characters that I find super fun, super relatable. All of the characters in the heist were a ragtag team of people that I felt were fun, people that were super quirky and so interesting, and I really enjoyed their banter on page, and that is something that I love about characters. I love when they have that relationship and it's close enough where they can kind of badger each other, but it's not like cringeworthy, you know? I also think that with the crafting of Vin and her character character arc over this first book was done extremely well. So with Vin being a street urchin, she did suffer from abuse, and thankfully none of that was on page, but a lot of the trauma and the PTSD from her past experiences for her first 16 years of life, I think she's 16, that continues on through the book. I think Brandon Sanderson did a great job with making this character feel like super real, and I feel like I keep saying that about like all of these authors making their characters feel like such like real people, but like that is such a huge thing for me. If these characters make sense in these worlds and I'm able to connect with them, that's what I look for when I am wanting to get into a book. So with this book, I think it's no different, that Brandon Sanderson killed it with creating Vin, with creating her mentor Kel, and everybody else that was in this heist. I think it was just beautifully done, and like I said with Ruined by John Gwen, Brandon Sanderson does a great job with reiterating certain things that are going to be important in a few pages. I only read the physical copy of this book. I heard mixed things about the audiobook from trusted sources, and I was really nervous about the audiobook for this. I hear that people who have tried the audiobook and love it, they love it. I know a few people who don't like the audiobook, so I just read it all myself, and it took me so long to read this book. I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad I finally got to read a Brandon Sanderson book, and I do have a huge spoiler vlog of this book documenting all of the experiences like in real time as I read this book. So I'll leave that link down below too, or like up in the cards if you're curious about my experience reading Brandon Sanderson in a spoilery vlog. Okay, so the next book up, which I also read in the same thriller and romance vlog that I read the other two books, Funny Story and The Perfect Marriage. I also read The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. I hated this book. I gave it a 2.5 star. I feel like the more it sits with me, it should just be a 2. Was it a 2? I said it was a 2. Yeah, honestly, it should be a 2-star read. I did not like this book. So this book follows our main character, what was her name? Sydney Shaw, and she's on the hunt for the perfect man, the perfect partner. Tom is looking for his next perfect victim. While I do love the format of dual timelines, I love a past timeline and then a future timeline, or like a present day timeline. I liked Tom's chapters, and Tom's chapters were in the past as he was growing into who he is in our present timeline as Sydney knows him. I was far more interested in Tom's life than I was with Sydney's life. I felt so many red flags and so many issues with Sydney's timelines. The big reveals were not shocking to me at all. There was the one final one that did end up happening that I think was like that final twist that I will give Frida McFadden. It got me. It was a good twist, but it really wasn't enough to absolutely wow me. And I think that the more that this book sits with me, the more I don't like it. The more I'm like, this was awful. And I hate to say that, but I struggled with the storytelling. I struggled with the writing. It felt like I was reading a draft. It felt like something that wasn't quite ready for publication, and it was just published anyways. I did watch an interview with this author kind of recently where she said in the interview that she had a book that was coming out, and I don't know if it's about The Boyfriend or The Crash, because I think that's another one that she has coming out soon, but it was one of those two books, I believe. In that interview, she had said that she had a book that was being released, but it was one of the first books that she ever wrote. My whole point of that being is this could have potentially been a book that she wrote like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe didn't do enough editing, or maybe like edited the first half of the book and then just maybe left the other half kind of untouched. That's just food for thought with this book. I will be totally honest, I read The Teacher by this author and I loved it, but to tell you how similar this book was to The Teacher, it was word for word. I'm sorry. I hope that's not a spoiler. It was just like word for word the same book, just different character names. I have heard the opposite though. While I'm saying I loved The Teacher and I hated The Boyfriend, I've heard the opposite where people enjoyed The Boyfriend and didn't like The Teacher. So that's just my experience. I own another book by this author and I will give her another shot. I just don't know when that shot's gonna be given. I'm nervous. I'm so nervous about where that book could potentially go. And for The Boyfriend, I only read the ebook. I think I got it free through my Kindle Unlimited. So this next book, I actually didn't rate this book because I don't know how to rate it. And it is The Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio. What's a brief synopsis of this book? I don't really know how to give you the synopsis before I give you my thoughts. Oh wow, this looks like the description's almost as long as the book. I'm just gonna read the little tagline at the top. It says, the author of Sale's sensation If We Were Villains returns returns with a story about a ragtag group of night shift workers who meet in the local cemetery to unearth the secrets lurking in an open grave. I really just don't know how I feel about this book. It might be middle of the road, but I'm just not gonna rate it. I read this in February and I still don't know how to rate it. But this book was a novella. Part of me felt like it was too short, and part of me feels like that's why I'm not disappointed, but hung up with how I feel about this book, because I wanted more. But I know, like deep down, I know that that was the author's intention. I love how it ended. It was super interesting. It was super creepy. It was super like, ooh, what's gonna happen? And then that was the end. I understand that that was the point that the author was making. I mean, that doesn't mean I have to like the point. I wanted more. I did listen to this book in a single day. It's like a 3-hour audiobook. I want to re-listen to it and see how it hits me the second time around, to see if maybe I pick up on some more things, or I don't know, maybe it grabs me a little bit differently. But overall, it was interesting. The characters were super interesting. That's the only format that I read this book was in audio, but I do think that audiobook was the full cast of characters and I really enjoyed that. I do love me a good full cast of characters. I think that with it being a full cast, it made it feel more complete, but I still felt like there was some stuff missing or some things that we could have elaborated on. The last book that I read in the month of February is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. Clementine has to visit her late aunt's apartment and finds a strange man standing in the apartment, but he exists 7 years in the past. She quite literally lives 7 years in his future. Her aunt always told her that the apartment is a pinch in time, a place where memories blended like watercolors. She also said that love is never a matter of time, but a matter of timing. And Clementine fears she may be 7 years too late. I gave this book, would I give it 4 stars? 5 stars. Oh, this was a 5-star read for me too. I listened to the audiobook and I read along with a physical copy, so this one was a tandem read. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was really fun. It was really cute. It was really sweet. I feel like it was a good palate cleanser and I read it at the perfect time in my life for me to get the most out of this book, if that makes any sense. I think that it tackled super heavy topics that I was not expecting. I was not expecting there to be certain conversations in here, so definitely make sure you check the trigger warnings. I was not expecting those topics to be in here and it caught me off guard. If I had known that going into this book, I still would have read it, but I don't think I would have been so shell-shocked. I overall really did love this book. I do own The Dead Romantics by the same author, but I'm scared to read it because of how much I hurt after reading this book. And this book did bring me to tears. I think I cried on camera. I think I was recording myself reading and I just happened to find out certain things and it made me cry. I loved it though. Who am I fooling? I loved it. This book was also in the same thrilling and romance vlog as the other 3 out of the 6 books that I read this month. So now we are on the last month, which is the month of March. Let's see what the stats say. What does the stats say? I read 6 books. I read 1,720 pages and the average time to finish a book took me 2 days. That is wild. I am like all over the place with this shit. I don't know. Sometimes it might take 5, sometimes it might take 10, sometimes it takes 2 for me to read books. I think that all has to do with me being a mood reader. And I do know in the month of March, I had quite a few video projects that I wanted to do. Was it? Oh no, not quite a few. I just had one. And so that dictated a lot of the books that I read this month, or the month of March, because of that vlog. First book that I read this month was The Humans by Matt Haig. I loved this book. I think I gave this book 3.5 stars, but the more it sits with me, I would be inclined to give it 4 stars. I still think fondly of this book. I think that a lot of the topics that were in here were presented well, written well, and I enjoyed it. So this book follows an alien who's disguised as a Cambridge professor. He's sent to eliminate certain human targets who know something about this mathematical equation. As this book goes on, our alien starts to form feelings and attachments to humans and to specific humans. I think that this book was done so well. The format of this book was also really well written. I listened to the audiobook and I also had the physical copy, but I think a lot of my experience was just listening to the audiobook. I thought it was a great time. I think that the author did a very swell job of the dark humor. I do love some humor. I do love some dark humor. I work in healthcare. I liked the dark humor. I think that Matt Haig is an author that can juggle certain topics and certain situations really well. That is what I have come to love about Matt Haig. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the story itself, like the plot. I think the plot was really well done. The twists and turns that happened in this book, they definitely kept me on edge and they kept me like, what's gonna happen? I'm kind of like freaking out here. Overall, it was a bittersweet story that I feel like aligns with life. It was super relatable, even though we were following an alien, but it puts a lot of the stuff that we do as humans into perspective. You know, why do we do the certain things that we do? Oh, are we just creatures of habit? Oh, we do this certain system, but we don't ever question why. I loved it. I think it raised a lot of really valid questions. Even though I work in healthcare, I'm going back to school for a master's degree in public health. So even though that this is a work of fiction, I feel like it speaks to me a lot as being a master's student in public health. Moving forward. So this next book I got from a friend. She sent it to me for Christmas, I think. So thank you so much, bestie. It is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I actually don't have this copy because I loaned it to a friend. This book, I gave it 4 stars. Honestly, the more it sits with me, I feel like it could be a 4.5 star. So I did mostly listen to the audiobook for this. It freaked me out. The brief synopsis of this novella is that we followed our main character who went to check on a sick friend after she had reached out to him, sent him a letter saying there's an issue. Actually, I think it may have been the brother that sent the letter to their ancestral home in this remote countryside home. But then weird and creepy wildlife roam about, and there is this weird, creepy, strange lake also involved. This book was insanely creepy. I definitely want to read more from T. Kingfisher. This was the first book that I read from this author. I was impressed. Even though this was a novella, I think that the creepy atmosphere, like the rabbits in this, just freaked me the hell out. There were also certain imagery that this author created that was so scary. Even though this was a novella, I feel like this packed hella punch. There are no spoilers, but there was this specific part in this book. It involved somebody walking barefoot in a white gown at night across creaky floorboards. That whole scene, that was so incredibly creepy. With the rabbits, that also creeped me out too. I was about at that part with like the creepy rabbits and then the other scene that I just described. I was reading that at night in bed. I got so freaked out. I had to go pee at like 2 o'clock in the morning and I was like, do I risk it for the biscuit or do I just suffer for another 3 hours? I did end up going to the bathroom. But when I tell you, I literally leapt into the bathroom and then leapt into bed. I kid you not, that's what I did because I didn't want to touch the floor because there could have been a rabbit on the floor. Just saying. So the next book up is a library book, which is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. So this book was super interesting. It follows a group of scientists that is made up of 4 women, and it is told by our narrator, the biologist. Their mission is to map the terrain and all their observations from their findings and of one another, and above all, avoid being contaminated by Area X itself. This book was interesting. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars and I still feel pretty confident. I feel really good about giving it 3.5 stars. I followed along with the audiobook. I was able to get the audiobook on Libby. I read this for a sci-fi vlog with Matt Haig's The Humans. It was weird, super creepy. The author did a fantastic job with the atmosphere and like the creepiness of the atmosphere. I finished the book being horribly confused, maddening confused, and when the audiobook was finished, I was like, what did I just read? What just happened? What is going on with my life right now? I still feel that way. I feel so indecisive about this book, but I was able to give it a star rating because it intrigued me enough. The ending of this book intrigued me enough to want to continue with the series, and I still do want to continue with this series. This book was just so wild. I don't really know what else to say other than it was just weird and wild and mind-boggling. We are down to the last 3 books that I read in the first quarter of 2025. This next book is The Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, and this book was so good. It was shockingly good. And I say shockingly, not like I was expecting something bad. That was none of it. It just, the storytelling, the writing, the characters, the beauty of this book shocked me. It just blew me out of the water. This book I gave, what I gave it, 4 stars. The more it sits with me, it might honestly be a 4.5 star, maybe even a 5. We'll see. We'll reevaluate at the end of the year. But this book takes place over like 400 years. So the first timeline starts in 1912 and we follow, what was his name? Edwin St. Andrew. And he was living on this remote island in the Canadian wilderness when there was the impossible notes of a violent echo in an airship terminal. This place, or is it a place, upends and connects a series of lives. A resident of the Second Moon Colony weaves the violin into her pandemic novel. Mariella Kessler, the victim of a Ponzi scheme, seeks her estranged friend, and Gaspari Andrews, a detective in the black-skied night city, glimpses a chance to do something extraordinary that will disrupt the timeline of the universe. I loved it. I think that all of these different timelines were so good. Even though some parts of this took place on a second moon colony, it doesn't feel impossible that these things could happen. And I think that the time bending element and like the whole time loop thing that happens in here is done so well. It's very well explained, and I thought that this was such a cozy, calm, and beautiful look at humanity. I think that this book was beautifully executed. I tandem read this book, even though I mostly did listen to the audiobook. There were certain parts in here where I had to refer back to the physical copy just to make sure I was keeping all the characters straight. I don't think that had anything to do with the storytelling. That was just more of a me thing. So I just wanted to make sure that I had all my ducks in a row. I do think that the audiobook was fantastic because it was a full cast, and I love a full cast of characters. Am I right? I could see myself rereading this whenever I wanted something that was like cozy and comforting. This would be it. So the next one up has been a book. Oh boy. So the next book up has been on my list for quite some time, probably since the book came out. It is 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So this book follows Kaz. He is the ringleader of this heist of a ragtag team of people who have to go to this prison and break out this well, I say prison, it's not really a prison, but it's kind of a prison. And they have to break out this scientist for a lot of money. I loved this. I do love a multi-POV story, and I love Leigh Bardugo's writing. I think that she crafts amazing characters. I loved all of these characters. Leigh Bardugo does just magic with her storytelling, but making you feel for these characters. I think that this book was so well done, absolutely well done. And I did end up listening to the audiobook as well, and I gave it 5 stars. And I think that that was the best way I could get the most out of this book, and I would recommend it. I can't wait to read the second book. I think that Leigh Bardugo also does a really great job with creating characters that have baggage and using that and like poking at those wounds. I loved all those little twists and turns that were happening in here too. Some of these characters, I love the little romances that are happening between them, the little like blossoming romances I also really love. Overall, I really don't have anything negative to say about this book. I think that the plot was super fun, super engaging. I also am somebody who is so extremely fascinated with the Grishaverse and with the Grisha. I don't know, there's something about this magic system, and I felt this way about Shadow and Bone, where it feels so magical. That's such a shitty word to use for that, but there's just something so intoxicating about the Grisha where I want them all. I'm so fascinated with them, and I think that Leigh Bardugo talks about the Grisha and also throws in a lot of political stuff in such a cool and interesting and realistic way. I also love, and maybe this is one of the reasons why I find the Grisha so fascinating, is because when you look at the whole world in here, that the Grisha are treated so differently wherever you go. I loved it. Nothing bad to say here. Just cannot wait to finish the series. I've got to know the ending. So the last book on this list is completing a series, question mark. I don't know if there's going to be another book after this. I think there is, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know when it comes out. But it is Vengeance of the Pirate Queen by Tricia Levenseller. So Tricia Levenseller was one of the first authors I found when I started to get into the bookish / / writing community. She was one of the first authors I found. I have loved all of her books that she has written that I've read. This book is in the Daughter of the Pirate King series. I'm actually not 100% sure what the name of the overall series is, but this is book 3. I won't spoil anything with the series for you guys, but this book follows a different character. The first 2 books follow Eloisa, I think that's how you pronounce her name, but she is the daughter of the Pirate King. And in this book, it follows a different character that is part of Eloisa's crew. And this character is sent on her own mission to go find some other missing crew members. Oh, I love her storytelling. I think that Trisha Levenseller just does such an awesome job crafting her stories. And I think that her characters are really fun and there's some really cute banter in here. While sometimes I feel like the writing is a little young, it doesn't like make me cringe, or it doesn't make me be like, okay, yeah, so let's just like get through this. I enjoy it. I enjoy her storytelling, and I feel like I can feel this author's passion in her writing and in her characters. I loved it. I gave this book 4 stars. This was the first book of the series that I listened to the audiobook because it was on Libby. So I just popped my headphones in and listened to this. I liked it. Those are all of the 16 books that I read in the first quarter of 2025. That was a lot. So sorry for such a long video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you're still here at the end and you don't know what else to say, leave me the skull and bones emoji down below in the comments. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Also, let me know what books you read in the first quarter and what their star ratings were. I will see you in the next one. Bye.